Welcome back, guys. We are joined here today with one of my good buddies, Grant Miller. The guy's an absolute animal, and I just feel pleasured to have the opportunity to share part of the stories that he and I have had hunting, as well as the way he got into hunting. So without further ado, Grant, just introduce yourself and tell everybody else a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks everybody for having me on. This is cool. Unlike most bow hunters or just hunters in general, I probably come at this with like a rookie experience level. So maybe this will be good for your listeners and give them an actual like glimpse of reality, you know, because you listen to a lot of these podcasts and a lot of times it's just with absolute killers like yourself who just like as you all know, like Artom is like so good at hunting. I mean, the guy's taught me so much, but like for me, you know, I'm not this guy who just came out of nowhere and is just killing huge bucks or like getting all after it. So I think it'll be good for your viewers to, or listeners to just kind of get a dose of reality and see, you know, the ins and outs of someone who came into hunting like brand new and just
because you weren't really raised in a hunting family or hunting community.
No.
So like what really kind of got your attention to even consider jumping into that?
Yeah. So originally about me, I'm from Bay City, Michigan. So that's like east side of Michigan. Think more like closer to the Thumb area. It's about an hour and a half north of Detroit. I'm growing up, family was more into fishing. So me and my dad, we'd always go with my uncle to fish. First time I ever hunted for deer was with my uncle, and it was just like doe hunting, and I got a doe, and I was like 16. And I was really into it, but at the time, I was big into baseball. I ended up playing baseball in college, so it kind of faded to the background. And then once I got done with college, I was like, I need to get back into the outdoors. I met you.
Well, before we even get to that, there's the point that you and I actually played against each other in college, but not our colleges, our college collegiate summer league.
Yep.
The Prospect League, and I think it was like the finals or national championship game, whatever it was that we were playing. And when we first did meet each other, which I'll let you go to that because it's just too crazy to me how that happened. But I think what we determined is we're like even off each other.
Yes.
You got a hit once, and I struck you out once.
And I think I grounded out to you too. Like all I remember was like for the listeners, Artom throws gas still for people. Like he threw so hard, and kind of segueing into how we met, I moved over to the west side of the state of Michigan, and I met Artom. I was helping coach a local high school team, and next thing you know, this guy comes in, and I'm like, man, this high schooler looks huge. He's got a beard. And anyways, we met each other. Turns out he wasn't a high schooler. You know,
we're going to state.
Yeah, a legit baseball player after college. And he's like, I got to throw a pen. You want to catch me? So he like is throwing like 94, and this is like a year after I'm done, and I'm like struggling to catch this guy. So he throws gas. But anyways, that's kind of how we got to know each other, and that's kind of how I got interested again, because I wanted to pick up doing that type of stuff, fishing, hunting.
Right, and just the outdoor perspective of things.
Yeah.
And naturally, when we were throwing bullpens, or I was throwing bullpens to you and you were catching me, we basically kind of came into the conversation. Like we started talking a little bit more. It drifted a little bit out of baseball. I was like, man, I appreciate you doing this. Like, what do you got going on later? And I think we started like maybe doing some fishing stuff, and I was talking about hunting and this and that, and you're like, I've really always wanted to get into that. And I'm like, dude, you just became a protege. Like, I'm going to take you with me. I'm going to put you through the ringer, and I'm going to let you know that everything we're doing is going to be 100% full tilt, probably more hardcore than what it needs to be, but just the intensity towards it so that when the moment comes, you're ready.
That is so true, because that's what we did. And again, I knew nothing about hunting. All I knew was you go out, you sit there, and you wait for a deer, and you shoot it, you harvest it. You know, like that, that to me was hunting. It was like as simple as that. I didn't understand any of the intricacies.
That is a big word.
It is. That's what gets me excited about hunting, is the challenge of it. If it was easy, then it wouldn't be that fun to me.
Right.
So that's what I liked about it. It's like a live chess game, which maybe sounds bad about when you're talking about an animal, but like that's the intrigue to it.
That's
it's very strategic.
That is what it is. You're basically having to outplay your opponent, which your opponent happens to be an animal, let's say deer for this instance, and you're trying to beat them in their own home. You're beating them at their game. Mm-hmm. That just makes it so much more fulfilling when everything does finally come through and become successful. And I know that we went for years of trying to get you a deer. We did like everything under the sun. You would constantly get opportunities, be so close countless times, and then there was a few times you had the opportunity and you took the shot. Nerves got the best of you. It happens to everybody. You know, it's just how it goes. But it made you gain that fire of like, okay, well, now I have to do it because I'm good enough to get in the area. You and I hunted a bunch together, and then we started doing more public land stuff. You and I, that's like our big deal is we hunt a lot of the public land around here.
Mm-hmm.
You're tied to it a little bit more than me now, which is, it's kind of funny because when I was younger and in high school and stuff, I was the one running all the public land. And then now that you and I have had the conversations and had all the thoughts and been out there and done it, you're married to that a lot more. Like, you like the idea of public hunting almost better than private land hunting.
Yes. Yeah, no, public land to me, part of it, I mean, I don't have like land. Yeah, I mean, obviously you've taken me, which is kind for you, but I just don't have that property myself. Although now, just as of recently, like, you know, last year was the first year I have 10 acres of my own, but up until that point I didn't. And at the same time, that was also when I'm like learning, you know, I'm learning from you, you're teaching me a bunch, but I'm also, you know, scouring the web of, okay, like everything about deer hunting. Like, what are the strategies? What are the tactics? What are like this, that? Like, what are you looking for? You know, you start coming into the beast hunting, you start going into hunting public, start all these, you know, different channels, you know.
It just starts consuming you if you let it.
And that's literally what happened to me. I got so deep into it, and the thought of public land hunting, and not only is it challenging because, you know, people are going in there, you have no control over that. You're kind of competing with them. The animals, it's a lot different animal on the public land than it is the private land.
Oh, like, 100%.
So it's just such a challenge, and to me, like, that just makes it so much better.
Right, and public land allows you to make your mistakes. But what I love about it is those mistakes that you make out there, you can improve on. Like, most of the time, it's a visual mistake that you're making. Because realistically, around here, we have a large deer population.
Yep.
So public land, if you're using good knowledge, whether you get it from your buddies or you're finding it online or whatever rail you take to find that information, you're probably going to put yourself in a position where you're going to at least see a deer. Now, being selective, shooting a bigger buck, shooting a doe, whatever, you know, that's a whole different spectrum. Right now, we're just talking about getting out, and we were wanting you to shoot a legal buck. I think that was the original plan right from the get-go.
Yeah, well, and so to give people perspective too, my first year, I graduated college 2017. First season I actually hunted was 2019, literally with zero background. At that point, our tune was just telling me, but it was mid-season, and I literally got a crossbow and just went out there. And it wasn't even around here. It was just at my wife's parents' house because they had property.
Right, on the other side of the state.
Yeah, and I just went like twice and saw a lot of deer, and that was cool. But then 2020 was like, okay, I spent the full off season before that scouting public land, scouting different areas. You're showing
and you had COVID as well.
Yeah, COVID too. You're showing me a bunch of areas, giving me a rundown what to do. You know, I'm checking satellites, looking for different spots. So 2020 was like that first year of like going all into it.
Right.
And I mean, just as a spoiler to the listeners, like I didn't get my first deer until
2022.
Yeah, it would have been, well, last year was 2022. So technically it would be 2021. So I went all of 2019, all of 2020 without getting
Because 19 we went out a handful of times.
Yeah.
It just wasn't full into it. And 2020 was like, I'm invested. I'm making this happen.
I had a lot of opportunities there, but just couldn't get it done.
Old back leg.
Yeah.
Back leg is a buck that Grant found in one of the spots that was close to his former house and a spot that I had hunted a lot in the past. It's kind of been littered with a bunch of pressure since then, but we got a picture of a great big deer wanted to hunt. And I mean, this isn't like a big deer for a first-time hunter. This is a high-caliber Michigan whitetail buck that we were just super stoked to be able to go. I think I went in there with you a couple of times, and we tried to pinch him and play our wins. And I mean, he's a smart deer. Right now, from what we know, he's still alive. It was the following year that you actually had the opportunity at him, and he beat you in the chess game because you hadn't seen anything, and you're like, all right, I'm just going to get down, get some lunch, maybe come back out this afternoon. And, of course, there he was standing in the grass coming right at you.
Well, so I guess this might be another, like, learning point for the listeners who maybe are like me, who are just starting and trying to get a feel for things. Like, so that day, it was rut. It was November 11th, I believe, maybe 9th, somewhere around there. And it was literally 77 degrees in Michigan. Every normal bow hunter would be like, it's 77 degrees. Like, deer aren't going to move. Obviously, it's rut, though. So I'm like, I don't care. I only got so much time. I'm getting out there. You never know. But the learning experience for that was, to your point, I got down from the tree, was packing up, making all these noise. Actually was breaking down limbs, trying to clear a shooting lane for the next tree I wanted to hunt for this guy. And next thing you know, I'm getting down. I don't have an arrow knocked. My bow is 10 yards over.
At this point, you had switched to a compound, too. The crossbow was just the first few hunts.
Yeah, and then I went to compound, and obviously I was brand new to that, so I was an awful shot.
I just feel like that's very true. But I just felt like that was definitely an important part of this, because given a crossbow versus a compound in this situation, this may have even ended a little bit differently.
I think he's a dead deer if it was a compound, or I'm sorry, a crossbow.
Right.
But yeah, you're 100% right, because I didn't have my release on. So, like, to my point of, like, learning experience here for you beginner hunters and even people who are hunting and just don't expect it, like, always keep your release on you and always keep a bow knocked if you can in the woods, because you never know what can happen. Because sure enough, this deer's nose to the ground. I think he was thinking there was maybe a fight or something else. And the other part of this is there was the private section was maybe 100 yards there. Like, I was close to the border, and the dude is out there, again, on a 70-degree day with a chainsaw, just blaring. So I'm like, screw this. It's 12 o'clock. I'm getting down.
Right.
Well, sure enough, that whole motto of, the noon booners or whatever that motto is of those midday cruisers, he's coming, and I'm, like, literally hiding behind this bush, and I'm getting everything knocked. I'm getting my release back on, and he's still coming at me, nose to the ground. I'm like, oh, my gosh, I got to be ready for this guy. So I kid you not, I'm like, finally get everything ready. He's like 10 yards away. He's still moving. I pull all the way back ever so slowly, and I'm just waiting for him to get around this bush. I'm just crossing my fingers that he passes. He gets right around the bush. All is showing is his neck. He looks right at me. Like, we're 5 yards away from each other, people. Like, this is soul to soul on the ground. Like, as cool as it gets. I don't know if I'll ever get an opportunity like that again. Well, anyways, I obviously didn't have a shot, but me being a beginner, he pops out. I get excited. And I just, like, let one fling at him, and I hit him in the back leg. So that's where the back leg motto came. And that was 2020.
Yeah, and that's where he got his name.
Yeah, and we've seen him these past 2 years, too, and I keep chasing him. Last year, I felt like I was like one step behind him. Because I had cameras everywhere, trying to understand how he's moving. I got a really good feel on it. I go one day, he shows up the next day. I pick this spot, he's at the other spot. It's just, that's how it works.
He knows what days you take off work and what days you don't.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, how old do you think this buck is? Like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old buck?
This deer is probably, this year I think he's going to be an 8.5-year-old buck.
Yeah.
Because we had pictures of him the very first year you started, because I was still running cameras in there as well.
Yeah. He was at least 3 or 4 at that point.
And that was the thing. We weren't really looking at like the 2.5 and 3.5-year-old age class bucks. Well, prior to you going in there.
For a buck.
Right. There wasn't really a whole lot of monitoring. It was just like, all right, there's a couple nice bucks in the area. Go in there. Well, this guy stood out, and then obviously the last 2-3 years he stood out, and even up until now. I mean, this is a big deer.
Yes.
So the story of Backleg hopefully will be concluded this year when Grant goes in there at like 10 o'clock in the morning after sleeping in, because now you have a kid, and he's going to keep you up, and you're going to be like, damn it, I just got to get out of the house. And you're going to go out there on a whim just to be away, and he's going to come cruising by at 20 yards.
Gosh, I hope so. And again, to the whole public land story, and just to make this story better, is we run these cams. I had 3 cameras out there that I set in December because I wanted the late season movement.
Right.
And I went to get it in March. I should have went earlier, waited too late. Well, sat there for, just skin. It would have had so many good pictures of this guy. I know it. And somebody stole my cameras. These were locked cameras, people, and they brought their clippers, brought them out. So there's other people who know about this deer, only making it that much cooler of a story if we're able to get it done.
Yeah, and that much more challenging.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's another part of the problem with public. You get some guys that give other hunters a bad name for doing stuff like that. Like you and I have run across so many other people's cameras, and at best, we'll pull the card, look to see what's on it, and put it right back in. We're not deleting anything.
Be respectful for it, And even that, I guess people probably go, oh, like, you guys shouldn't be doing that. But, like, when I've had cameras out there unlocked, like, I truly don't care if people are going to look at it. Just keep it running. Like,
don't clear it. Don't be a dick.
It's public land, so use it. Like, it's fine. Same with my stand. Like if I walked in and I saw somebody on my stand, like I know a lot of people would get really upset on that. I personally wouldn't. It's public land. That's part of the game. Like, so
yeah, and we have the rules in place for that as well,
Right.
as to what's respectful or what's not. But you're walking into, like, say you and I were walking into a piece that we hadn't been to, and there was a stand there. I think the legal rule of thumb is it has to be like at daylight or 30 minutes past daylight before you can climb in that stand.
Yep.
If it's not yours and it's properly marked, and that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
But out of respect, you and I had done that once or twice, and we sat at the base of the tree, not getting all of our stuff ready, just to make sure that that hunter wasn't going to be in there that day. Because if he was, 100%, we're up and gone. We're leaving. You've put in the work. You've put in that stand. More power to you. And that's just because the karma aspect. Like, we'd like for that to be done the same to us, you know?
Yeah. Well, and around here, because people are probably questioning, like, okay, like, what are these guys doing? Well, like around here, yeah, the rule is you got to remove your stand, but nobody removes their stands around here really well. So
no, most of them are 90% of the stands that are on public are there year round.
Are there, and so then you get in these situations, and we've seen it where there's a stand in the area we want to hunt, so we wait a year, and you can tell there's been I'll even go up in the stand, like put a bunch of crap in it to make sure, like, so if somebody hunted in it, you would know, and it's just like it. And I've seen stands like that for like 3 years. So
yeah, that had just been neglected and are no longer used.
And you don't want to use their area, but at the same time, it's like, okay, they're not hunting it, so you just got to be courteous.
Definitely going to have some mixed opinions on that from people. I guarantee it.
Oh, yeah.
Because, there is a spectrum, and what you think respectful, maybe somebody else doesn't, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, like I say, we're doing what we feel is best for that.
Right.
Because if they would do it to us, that's how I would see it.
Yeah.
Like, private land, totally different. If you're in my stand in private land and you don't have permission, we're going to have problems.
Right.
But public land, that's for everybody to enjoy. I want you to be just as successful. If you took the time to find the exact spot where I put my stand, and you're out there and I'm not, dude, I hope you shoot a booner. I hope you shoot the absolute biggest deer in the state that year. Like, that would be sick.
Yeah. Well, that kind of gets to my next point of just like, when I first started, and also what got me hooked. So, I'm trying some of these different areas. Some of these areas you didn't necessarily show me. Some of you walked in with me, and just like the satisfaction, I remember it was my first hunt actually out in public land around here. I had set up a tree at that. I also saddle hunt, so I had set this tree up preseason. I go out there, I really didn't use any cameras. It was just pure satellite, and I saw a sign in the off season. I remember going out there for the first time. I saw a deer, and it was like just that, like, satisfaction of, wow, like what Artom's teaching me and what I'm learning, like I'm putting it to use and practice, and it's like working. There were 3 does, don't get me wrong, but they got within 30 yards before they blew at me and ran out,
Well, it's nice. You're like, wow, this guy's not full of shit and just putting me in an upwind spot so that the deer go to him.
Yes.
That's part of what makes it so fun, is just learning curve. And like we mentioned, the back leg story, that's something we're going to hold on to forever.
Mm-hmm.
There's also like the late season hunting that nobody really thinks about.
Yeah.
Especially late archery season. I remember that year you were talking to me about it, and like, do you think it's even worth going? I'm like, dude, listen, you're either going to be in the right spot at the right time and see a ton, or you're going to go out there and you're not going to see anything. I mean, that's just how it's going to go, especially with such vast land for the public, the way it is, and it's so similar all around. And you actually had the opportunity at that giant 10-point.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And just this is what's so crazy about deer hunting is I swear these deer knew I was a rookie, and they knew I couldn't shoot. So like that was 2019, or no, that was end of 2020. In that 2020 for people, I single lunged one where we tracked for maybe like 800 yards through the rain. I think if it didn't rain, we would have waited longer, and I think we get that deer.
100%.
But that was a nice little 7-point. It would have been an awesome first buck. Then I ran into back leg, and then I ran into another just as big as back leg, really. I mean, maybe a little smaller, but he was a wall hanger, and I missed him at 30 yards. So 2020, again, still getting into shooting the compound. So practice shooting, like, again, as a beginner, practice shooting. Like, you can, for me, I put all the time into trying to find the deer and get on deer, but I didn't practice shooting, and it killed me.
Yeah, it kicked you in the ass at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily a bad shot. You just aren't a confident shooter, because shooting at the target, you're fine. You figure it all out. You get your breathing right. We got you all zoned in. I know every time you were worried if your pin was off a little bit, you'd bring your bow over to me. I'd have it fixed whippity slick just right away. We'll get it set and you're ready to go. But shooting at a target is so much different than actually being in the moment and heat of the moment, especially for you being by yourself going after your first ever deer. You got the fever, dude.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And to back to that end of season story. So it was Christmas Eve and maybe the day before Christmas Eve, and Artom's like, hey, go to this stand.
Well, I was out of tags, and I was like,
he's like, just go to it. Like,
it's gonna be good.
And sure enough, like, that was my best hunt of the year. So to the listeners, it doesn't have to be rut, doesn't have to be early season. Like, you can still have amazing hunts when you're on them in December, because it was a morning hunt. Nobody hunts mornings in December. Everyone's like, oh, it's
on public land.
Yeah, they go, oh, it's afternoon. Find the food source. This was, I mean, there was food sources nearby, but to me, this wouldn't be just like a logical morning spot, in my opinion.
No, your food sources they're there, but they're a half a mile away.
Yeah,
you're kind of tucked into the timber.
Yeah, and this is like, and again, usually for me, as I've learned, I try and hunt bedding a lot more, especially in public land. Like, be aggressive, go where they're bedding. They weren't bedding in here; they're bedding around, and it's more like a transition zone. And I kid you not, I saw probably about 15 different deer in a 3-hour sit, and I saw 4 bucks chasing a little doe fawn who was in heat, and sure enough. This one he was all the way back behind me. It was muzzleloader season. I'm a lefty, so it just kind of didn't work out before I could get around to take a shot at him. But he was 15 yards out of nowhere, right behind me, big 10-point, like huge. Like, this guy he still might be the biggest one I've seen in public so far.
Yeah, and that's experience again too. That just comes with time, because now. If you had that exact same situation happen, you can kind of use that tree to your advantage. You can get away with that little bit of movement to raise your gun and actually get that shot, especially when he's that close and you've got such an opening for so long behind you.
Yeah.
Plus, he's so focused on that yearling that's in heat that he's probably not going to go far. Even if they get spooked, it's probably going to be like a 15 to 30-yard run, and they're going to stop and look back and be like, all right, what the hell is that? And at that point, you'd better have your crosshairs on them.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. 100%. But I feel like after that year, most beginner hunters would be like, screw this is way too tough. I quit, or I'm just going to go hunt rifle season in some nice stand on private, Right. But to me, I was like, no, this is why I'm here. Like, these are opportunities. This is fun. So it just took one more year, and I finally got it done,
And then we fast forward to your first ever buck.
Yeah.
To finally getting it. I'm not sure if you were more excited or if I was more excited for you, because it was so cool. You and I were texting each other. We're in 2 totally different spots. I was hunting one of my private pieces, and you were on some public that we looked at. I think it was like 2 years prior to that.
It was 2 years prior, and you had told me, hey, I've been in there. There's deer in there. And
even though it looks like there would be no chance of anything there,
yeah,
it's such a small piece.
Another teaching point, like, don't overlook those small pieces. And people will say this all the time, but don't access off the normal access points. Like, how I was accessing this place was completely different than every single hunter in the area. And the only reason I set myself up for there is you told me first, and then me scouting like this whole area, and then actually putting cameras in there during the off season and like validating, okay, like, these are how the deer are using it. This is like a really good travel corridor. Once it gets to rut time, like, there's going to be bucks in here, because at the time it was mostly just a bunch of doe action. And that was my first hunt at that stand where I got it done. So which makes it that much cooler, because it was all literally scouting and preparation that got it done.
And I think that was like October 21st or the 27th.
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 I love October 27th.
October 27th.
Every year, it's great. Every year.
That is like one of the hottest days of the year. Mm-hmm. And I would be hard pressed to have anybody try to convince me otherwise, because you've seen it every year. October 27th is your day.
Yeah. And I don't know. It kind of gets into that theory. Okay, like, do you like rut? Do you like pre-rut? Like, what's your favorite time of year? Like, what? So far, from what I've gathered, to me, pre-rut is the most fun, but it's just a shorter window of when it's actually hot. But when those bucks are just ready, but those does just quite aren't ready, or there's only a couple does, those bucks are moving, and it's right around that time.
They're going nuts.
And yeah, and because then once what I've learned, especially with how many does are in the area, once you get into rut or even just November, the buck movement almost seems down. Sure, you do see bucks moving in weird patterns, but there's just so many does in heat, I think, that those bucks get nested up with them.
You have to be in the right place.
Yeah, so it's either
That's
hot
just it.
or cold.
Everyone has this perception that no matter where you sit during rut, you're going to see a bunch of deer, like bucks chasing does, no matter what. Honestly, that seems a little bit more rare than what people are factoring in, because if you're not in the right spot, you could be in the heat of the rut, and honest to God, those deer, those bucks could be chasing those does 500 yards from you and just not making it to you. Those deer that are generally absolutely filling that area are probably still in that area, just not where you can see them.
Yeah, and I've been in areas where it smells so strong of estrus, and like it should be hot in here, but there is zero deer action, and I don't know, maybe I'm just hunting the wrong spots, but, I'm hunting, like, funnels in, like, areas where you'd think rut would be good. Hunting doe bedding areas, and it's just not. Like, I've strucken out during the rut just as much as non-rut times. It's weird.
Like your early season where you're just kind of guessing.
Yeah.
And it's not much different. I almost feel, and you and I have had this conversation more than a handful of times, that during the rut, if you're struggling in your spots, whether it be just one spot, a couple spots, whatever it is, pull up a map, close your eyes, put your finger down, and go to that spot.
Yeah. I think it just comes down to the unpredictable. It's so unpredictable that, like, for me, I'm so analytical that I'm trying to go back off of old camera history. I'm trying to go off what I saw 2 weeks ago, and you almost need to throw all of that out the window. You're
starting fresh. Yeah, if you know the rut's on.
It's just so random to me that I can't. And I think that's why I like pre-rut, is because all of a sudden that full-on unpredictability is not quite there, but the rut or the buck movement is at its highest.
Right.
At least around here, because the doe ratio is so skewed in Michigan that I think that plays a big part of that.
100%. And just going back to the pre-rut, going back to your first buck, dude, I mean, we'll chase rabbits down the hole all day. We got to try to stay focused on it a little bit. I cannot forget the way it happened. Like, you were sitting there, we were texting kind of back and forth about what was going on. You're seeing movement. I had some deer at a little bit of a distance, like nothing I was going to shoot, but I knew there was some big bucks in the area for me. My phone was vibrating right about the same time that I saw, like, the buck that I was going to shoot come out. And I'm like, God, somebody's calling me. And during this time, most people know me. They know they're not calling me until after dark or midday or whatever it might be. So I'm like, all right, I'll just take a peek a second. And it was you calling. And I'm like whispering. I pull my phone up. I'm like, hello. And then all of a sudden you just got great. Dude, I just fucking did. Like, I smoked him. And I'm like, dude, that's sick. Like, whispering.
He's not kidding. Like, that's literally because you had your own right there.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, just like, give me like 10 minutes. You're like, oh, all right, dude, what should I do? I'm like, just stay there. We might double. And you went, what? And I just hung up. And sure enough, dude, because I just grunted before that call came in, and this buck comes walking out 30 yards from me, and I stuck him. And I was pumped, and I like watched him run, but my first thought was like, dude, I got to call Grant. I got to call him back. So I call him. I'm like, dude, what just happened? Tell me the whole thing. You told me everything, and I was hyped for you. And right at the end, I was like, we're tracking 2 tonight, boy. We got a double.
Yeah, that was so fun. It was just one of those moments, too, especially after the year before, where there's so much failure. There's so many opportunities on nice bucks and just failed, that to finally get it done and just execute on this buck. Because it was like 10 yards, and I just put it where I wanted to. And he didn't go far. I mean, he went 50 yards. And
no, he was not far at all. It was a perfect shot. You were running the saddle system that you had. And I remember we went in there, or we were trying to make a plan to go get yours and mine and like figure out what was working best. And I think your wife called you or something, and you had to go home and leave it.
She was getting stalked at Meyer.
Yeah.
Human traffickers or something, man. That's serious.
She felt very uneasy, so you had to go take care of that. And I remember I was like, okay, well, obviously if you need help, like, let me know. But there's not really anything I can do right here. You just got to go home and basically put her at ease that nothing's happening. So I'm going to go grab my deer. And I called my dad. We got it found. He ran, I think he was like 70 or 80 yards away, and he was piled up. And I'm like, I need to hustle up and get this thing out, because I was so pumped for yours that I wanted to get yours. So my dad bought a baby stroller at a garage sale for like $3. And he was jokingly telling me, he goes, dude, this will make a great deer cart. And I'm like, well, better now than never. This is like the perfect area for it. So sure enough, we threw my 10-point in this little baby stroller and rolled it out through the night to the road. And I'm walking down the road with a buck's like ratchet strapped into a baby stroller headed towards my truck, loaded that thing up, called you, and you're like, all right, yeah, man, like she's really uncomfortable right now. You know, I don't think I can look. Like, we'll go in the morning. I'm like, Grant, dude, there's a giant storm coming. Like, it's going to be piss and rain. I said, if you're not going, I'm going by myself. Like, you need to get this done.
And it was killing me, like literally killing me, but you want to be there for your wife, you know, like
you have to.
She was terrified. Like, she was truly terrified. So I think we ended up going out at like 1 a.m. We're
right.
Like,
my lady came to comfort your lady.
Yes.
And at this point, it was like midnight.
Yeah.
It was midnight, 1 o'clock, whatever it was.
I think it was like 12:30 or 1 where we went out to go get it, and then it took us a little bit. By the time I went to bed that night, it was, I believe, 4:30 in the morning, and I still couldn't sleep because I was so excited about this.
Dude, we got there, went walking through, you replayed the whole situation, and we started tracking blood, and we're like, okay, this is good blood. Like, this is, Grant actually knows that he hit a good shot, because I know in the past you're like, I think I hit it good.
Yeah.
And just weren't too sure, because like that goes back to the experience in it. And we're like, all right, dude, this deer's got to be dead. And it felt like it was so much further than what it was because of how thick it was. I mean,
thick stuff.
Dude, I mean, just miserable to walk through. Like, how could anything but a rabbit get through any of this? And we're crawling on our hands and knees and like pushing through. And he's like, is that blood? And like, I don't know. My chest just rubbed something wet. Maybe. And finally, we get kind of close, and out of the corner of my light, I'm like, I think that might be a deer, but I want Grant to find it. So I was like, Grant, just get up here on blood. And you walked around the corner and kept trailing it. And I think, dude, it was like 5 yards before you actually saw it. You were right
it was
up on
so thick that I didn't even see it, because you're just looking like literally a foot in front of you, looking for blood, trying to see, and it's pitch dark. And yeah, I just remember seeing that and just being so excited. I mean, you can see it. You can kind of hear my excitement and see it in the YouTube video that you guys have. But yeah, that was just such a awesome winning moment, because it was just a culmination of so many years and hours and blood and sweat of just pouring into deer hunting to try and get it done. So like when you finally get it done, it's just like you feel invincible. You do.
Oh, dude. And that was it. Like I said, I was so excited for you and seeing your excitement on it. And then we hated each other trying to get it out of there.
Oh, my God.
And then when we finally did, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was at this point. My buck's still in the back of my truck, too. I'm like, all right, let's just dump that thing out. We'll take some pictures together. We set like a camera up on a backpack, because who you going to call and come take some pictures? Whole gutting process. Got to show you that.
That was my first time. It took me like an hour, it felt like. I mean, Artom guts, anybody, you should pay this man to gut a deer. He will gut a deer in less than 5 minutes. It's incredible. Me, literally takes easily at least 30 minutes, probably more. It's probably closer to 45, honestly. Like,
experience. That's all we're...
But it's amazing. It's amazing.
I appreciate that. But we got that all done, all said and done, beyond exhausted. And we're like, okay, maybe we can just bring this to the freezer at the local processor and get it hung up. Well, first we went to the house, to my house, to hang it up in the barn. Right, and we're like, we'll just hang it on this and deal with it tomorrow morning, nice and early. Well, we get there, and one of my ropes was snapped. Like, we couldn't use it. And then we threw a new one up over a board. We're, like, backing the truck up to it. We had to use, like, some thin paracord type rope or whatever the hell it was to a makeshift gamble. It was literally like a stick with some screws in it. We couldn't, like, lift it. We're like, well, maybe if, I just drive forward, this thing will swing back, and it won't be high, but it'll be hanging enough. And we drove forward, and the thing just snapped. It broke the wood above us. So we're like, oh, Jesus Christ. Let's just throw it into the truck. We'll drive it up to the processor, because they had the walk-in freezer.
Yeah, that's right.
And we get all the way up there, and it's locked. They're closed. We're like, wow, this is turning into an absolute shamble. Everything is going wrong. Finally, I think we finally came back, ended up getting them both hung up with some different system or whatever it was, and then the next day took them in there. Dude, just an experience for the ages.
Oh, so fun. So fun.
And like I said, now you're hooked in it.
I'm so hooked. Like, in this year, I was able to get it done on private land because it was actually I moved into a house with 10 acres and I got it done with my dad. It was like the best. You know, my dad doesn't hunt either. Take him out on the field. You know, it's really
it was gun season.
It was gun season. It was the day after Thanksgiving actually, and again, that second rut. The problem is after guns. Once you get into gun season in Michigan, the pressure is so strong that it's just those deer start not moving like they usually do. But that second rut was starting to come on, and you had saw the buck first in that field, and you told me that 2 days prior. So I was like, Dad, this is our chance. Let's just do it. And he got his first buck this year, and I was right there coaching him through it. and best part is, Artom was right there. He texted me 5 minutes before we got this buck down. Hey, I see you guys in the field. He's from the road. He's probably 300 yards out from the road, and he sees us in Orange. And he watches,
just sitting in like this makeshift ground blind. These two goons with their orange hats, like barely hidden. I'm like, is that you? And I was actually taking another guy out hunting, trying to get him a deer, who I'm sure will be on here at some point. And we're driving by, and I like just pumped the brakes. I'm like, dude, let's just back up and see, because I swear there was deer in the field, and I saw orange. Like, I don't know. I figured he'd shoot one by now. And literally, as soon as I put it, like I texted you, pump the brakes, put it in reverse, because I just wanted to go see what was going on, and go boom. We're like, okay.
He watched it. You watched this whole thing go down. It was awesome. And then the deer ended up not going far at all and basically dying in my driveway.
When I pulled up the driveway, it was like in the little ditch to the side, and you and your dad are like, yeah, you know, maybe we should give it a little bit. And I'm like, I really don't think you need to. I think you're good.
And it was just, I think the bad shot runs in our blood. Because my dad is a 12-gauge shotgun, and he took about 7 shots at this thing. Just boom, boom, boom. I'm like, re-rack.
Just keep shooting. It's still moving.
Yeah, he hit it, but it was barely moving. I'm like, this is like our tomb telling me this. He's like, you just keep going until that thing's down. I'm like, re-rack it. And I'm like screaming at my dad. He's like going as fast as he can.
Dropping full shells, loading slugs.
Oh my gosh. And then your dad's friend, he heard all of this and like,
because he's the neighbor.
Yeah, he's the neighbor. He's like, what is going on? World War II is outside my door. And he comes in after a while. And
yeah, he called me. He's like, do you know what's going on at your buddy's place? I'm like, yeah, man. I think they got one, but they're taking a few extra shots to get it done. And he, exactly what he said. He's like, dude, it sounds like there's a war happening. Like, is everyone all right? I'm like, yeah, they're fine. It's just the Millers. 7
shots, and I don't know if he only hit him once or twice. I think he hit him twice.
Twice from when we got to it and dragged it. And that was actually really cool, too, because the slug was still stuck in him when we got to it. We flipped it over, and it looked like a knot on his shoulder. And I don't know if it passed through the other side or just stopped the way it was and maybe didn't have, like, I don't know. It was wild, but, like, it had mushroomed just under the hide, but barely into the meat. So it was almost like you could
pull it out.
Yeah, it was like squeezing a pimple, but instead of a pimple, it was a slug that would come out of this thing.
Yeah. That was a fun hunt. I got just as much enjoyment out of getting my dad his first buck as I did getting mine the year before. And, you know, in public this year, for whatever reason, just didn't get the opportunities quite like I wanted to. But it was a successful year after that, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, dude, this has been great. We'll have you on here again for sure. I love our experiences together, being able to go out and kind of exchange knowledge, and now you're finding stuff out that you're telling me that maybe I've overlooked or haven't even thought about, and changing back and forth. And I mean, that's just the camaraderie of hunting, getting guys into it, staying with each other, and just being able to be out there and have a great time. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on the Tagged Outdoors podcast, man.
Anytime. Follow, subscribe, Tagged Outdoors, people. They're great.
That's right, guys. Thanks for listening.